What's up guys, Slash here. Today we're going for low value budget decks. So if you haven't subscribed already, don't forget to do so. We're going one of each color and we're going for cards that are going to be around 50 euros and less. So we're more hitting the price point between 30 to 40 euros. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So here we are. This deck is all about playing your 15Ks or higher each turn, and from doing that, your leader allows you to draw one card and give that card 5k bonus power, making all your battle cards that little bit stronger. Now, the things that we're going to be talking about, we're going for more key things to look at. So, to awaken with this deck, you need 3 or more Z energy, and the best way to do that is by playing your Super Saiyan 4 Gokus and just trying to pump some Z energy between you and your opponent's turns. So once you have 3 or more Z energy, then you can awaken. We're trying to focus on running about 7 counters in total. We've got a lot of free plays here. So we have After Image Techniques. These are Sparking 5, which is pretty easy to do with this deck once you have Z awakened and play your Z battle card. We also have 3 Testing Oppositions. It's just cheap options for counters. And because these become free plays to avoid those double strikes from your opponent, it just makes it that little bit easier when you want to flood your field and tap yourself out for energy. We also have some other key things to look at, such as the Unison here. Obviously, there are better Unisons out there, but this also comes with the starter deck, and this is actually still a pretty good card in general. Every time you combo, you get to draw one, and then this card will get double strike for the turn. Therefore, you're going to be able to have more and more damage each turn. And if you really need to, you can use the -0 here, and then choose one of your opponent's battle cards and gets -15 for the turn. So you can just deal with your opponent's field if you need to. Then we also have some other things to look at, such as the Super Saiyan 4 Goku here. This is a great turn 1 card. As you play this, you will have to burst 2 cards, and then when you attack with this card, you can choose a card in your drop and boost with it. Therefore, you can charge it to your Z energy to awaken a lot quicker. Now, the other things to be looking at here is we have Pan United Motion. This is also a very good card for the deck. This one is, if you play this card and it becomes 20k or more, you top 5, you grab a Unison or a battle card as a Saiyan that's 5 or less and add it to your hand. Very handy. And our Z battle card is the big threat for this deck, so managing it is your best bet of cutting down your opponent's life as soon as possible. Because we run a lot of Saiyans, there are a lot of 15ks, we run 2 strategies to give them the barrier just to help them stay on board that little bit longer, which just helps your opponent not being able to clear them, because if they don't clear them, there's so much more damage you're going to be doing next turn. This is our barrier removal for the deck as well. They're cheap little cards. We have some Realm of Gods here for a little bit extra boost to your opponent, and of course the Trunks Deluge of Power for that little bit of extra boost as well when you're trying to swing with your battle cards. And then of course, for a extra option that you could run for a ultimate, you could go for the Heron's Lineage. It's about 20 euros roughly, so give or take in American or Oceanic currencies, it's probably more or less the same in most places. It's just a handy card. If your opponent's going to attack you with, let's say, a 6 cost double strike dual attacker or something, you can Heron's Lineage it, take control of it, and just cut off their damage in that attack for that turn. So yeah, that's pretty much more or less the deck, and I think for turns 1, 2, and 3, what you want to go for with this deck. Turns 1, you want to try to charge your Z energy, play one of those Super Saiyan 4 Gokus, the Sense Returned, or a Pan United Emotion, just to help with that draw as well. And then for turns 2, keep that aggression going, along with charging your Z energy. Try to play your free play Gokus or the Great Apes during your opponent's turn, therefore it allows you to get the extra 5k on the card and draw another card, so you can also draw during your opponent's turn, which is awesome. And then on turn 3, spam out your 15ks and boost with them as much as you can, just stay aggressive. And of course, just try to play your Z battle card if you can, the Goku, and then your opponent will have to crit a life from that. And for turns 4, play your Goku Piccolo card, and make that the first card you play. That way it gets the bonus 5k from it, so it become a 30k. So it'll be a 30k double strike dual attack to your opponent. That is big boy damage. And of course for defenses, use your free counters to avoid those double strikes from your opponent. Topo is for more of your slower paced games, so if your opponent's trying to draw you out to like a turn 4, turn 5, or even turn 6 potentially, Topo is just great to stall your opponent from it, and also it's very good for mirror matches. And of course, Beerus Ball is a fantastic card to be able to help clear your opponent's setup. Therefore, it also gives your leader plus 5k for the turn. That way, if you do it as early as possible, so at the beginning of your turn, your opponent plays something, then you do the Beerus Ball, Therefore, your leader's going to get an additional 5k for the turn, just to make it a little bit easier to defend with. And then, of course, what we're looking at for this card here in general is, this is the big keynote for the Z deck. We only run 2. Obviously, if you can get more, always get more. But this is a Deflect Double Strike. It's going to have Barrier for the turn, and it's a 20k beat stick. So, of course, when you play this, if your opponent has 4 or more life, you deal 1 damage to them. And then therefore as well, if this card is in your drop, you would put this card underneath it, and you gain this following effect onto your battle card. When this card attacks, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, and it gets minus 25k power for the turn, which is very, very good. And then of course we have the additional effect here, the Activate main once per turn. If your leader is a pan-only card, you have 4 or more energy, and a Great Ape Son Goku the Aggressor, which is the card I just showed, is under this card. This card gets dual attack and 5k for the turn. Then you also pair that with the Awakened Side Leader's effect, the Activate main. You give it an additional 5k, and then don't forget, if this is the first card you played for your turn, it's going to get another 5k. So you're going to swing for about 30k double strike dual attack with barrier to your opponent, and it's going to minus 25 one of their battle cards. Amazing effect. That is your game ender, along with your Son Goku and Piccolo. So let's move on to the next list. So we have Android 18 for blue. This deck is all about the early game of playing your Android 18s and comboing with Krillins. So around turn 3 onwards, you want to be able to get your Android 18 double strike 20ks on field, and then pair that with your Krillins that will become dual attackers or blockers, whichever one you choose to play. And of course, to awaken with this deck, all you need to do is put your androids under your leader, which you can do very easy because you have your 1-drop Krillin and Android 18s, and therefore when you play it, you get to draw 1 and then place that card under your leader. Once you have 3 or more cards under your leader, then you can awaken. And the key things that we're going to talk about for this deck, we have plenty of cards to help restand your energy, and we also have plenty of cards that can be used as free counters. If you see your Unison, the Majin Buu, try to play it if you can. Uber is also a fantastic card to use against your opponent. All your opponent needs is 2 or more Z energy, and then you can play it, and it's just going to burn like 3 cards on their field and help you draw. And of course, expect your opponent to be able to remove your battle cards because they are threats. So a good tip is to try and always keep one of the Android 18 5 costs under your leader, because you can also play that card during your opponent's turn. Now let's talk about the turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. For turns 1, play your 1-drop Android 18 or Krillins, and then of course from the draw, place it under your leader. And then of course for turns 2, play your Android 18, the Krillin dual attacker, which will give you your Unison on board for free as well. And that Unison's pretty handy because it +2s and will help you put more cards under your leader. And for turns 3, play your Android 18, the double strike 5 cost, and of course you get to play your Krillin when you play that as well, by paying 1 energy from your effect. And finally, of course, for turn 4, if you have your Z leader awakened, try to play your Z battle cards as soon as possible. It is big damage to your opponent. Try to use them more accordingly to the setup what you have. So Android 17 is more of the lowering your opponent's life as much as possible and not really going for game win. But the Krillin I found is better for finishing games because you also get the dual attack from it. And key little extra cards to talk about here, I would say we have the Android 17. This can also help restand your 5 cost or your 4 cost, just giving you that little bit more damage each turn. And then of course we also have the SSB Vegito. Now this is a very heavy cost card, but if your opponent is trying to go for those long games, this is such a punishing card to your opponent. At the end of your turn, switch this card to active mode, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, place it at the bottom of its owner's deck, and your opponent places 1 card from their hand at the bottom of their deck as well. So that will just keep going every single turn. So of course there's a lot of barrier removal these days, so that's why we only run 1 copy of this card, just so if you happen to see it and you need it, you have it. And then of course finally for the ultimate with choice, if you want to go with something for this deck to make it that bit stronger, a good choice is actually the Hachiyak. These are roughly around 20 euros each now, give or take depending on the current market values, but they're very, very cheap. They got reprinted and there are 3 different versions of the card, technically 4 because of a reprint. So this card is a very amazing card. It's pretty much just going to shut your opponent's turn down completely. And this deck is pretty cheap overall. All of the ones we're seeing, I would say, are roughly around 20 to 30 euros. However, the next one we're going to is very cheap. So let's jump into that one. Here we are, we have Magenta. Now, Magenta is a lot of fun. This deck is all about hand destruction. To achieve this, by playing your battle cards, if you have one card with Villainous on the field, then of course the next one you play will activate the previous card's Villainous effect. You trigger the first card's effect once per turn as well, and your leader allows you to awaken just by having 2 Villainous cards on field, which is very simple to do. The key things that we'll talk about in this deck: your Z battle card is fantastic to help you draw, and also pump out that little bit of damage to your opponent. Your playtime's over counter is really good to help replay your 1-drop Villainous cards. Of course, when they're first played, their skills are negated. However, then during the next turn, when you play something, you're going to have more Villainous on field, which means you can pop off more hand destruction to your opponent. And of course, use each card based on what your opponent is doing, as each card has their own unique effects. And of course, for turns 1, 2, 3, and a little bit of 4, play a Villainous 1-drop, but don't use the effects, because you either can choose to draw with it, but then you negate the skills of that card permanently for the game, or you can choose to keep it on the field, and then when you play your next Villainous card, you can pop off the Villainous effect, and of course on turn 2, attack with your leader, draw from it, then of course play your second Villainous, then awaken. That way you get to do the top 5 from your unawakened leader sides first. That way you can help search for more Villainous a bit better, because the awakened side is just draw 1. And then of course on turn 3, try to activate your Villainous effect from your leader, allowing you to play one of your Villainous cards equivalent to what energy you have. So if you have 3 or more energy, then you can play one of your 3 drops, depending on which one you want to do, according to the situation that you have. And try to focus on keeping your cards on field, as your opponent's going to make it their main objective to try and remove them. Then of course on turns 4, start emptying their hand, so go for Villainous, 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 and then go for your big damage. Therefore your opponent has no hand to be able to boost or counter with. And that's more or less the deck. So let's move on to the next one. Now, for green we have Cell. Now I think Cell is a great option. Of course you can pick up 2 ultimate decks yourself and pretty much make a good basic version of this. However, we're trying to make it that little bit more optimized, as the game keeps getting slowly stronger and stronger and stronger, and we want to have more and more damage and defense. So this deck is all about KOing your opponent's cards and being able to use your Union effect to be able to play your cells. And tips for the deck would be, your 1-cost cells can be free played as well from their effects. Your Unison is a great card to play as early as possible. It has a really nasty effect of a -7, where it can remove 3 cards in your opponent's hand and make them crit a life. And of course when you use Union, you get to draw a card. Our 8-cost is a really handy card. It's practically a dual attacker, and on top of that has an awesome permanent effect which allows you to remove cards from underneath it to stop it being KO'd by your opponent's skills. And our Wretched Regeneration counter is a great in-game play, letting us play our perfect force cell, which will empty their opponent's hand down to 3. Our 1-drops will help us awaken very early with the deck, so try to get them out on turn 1. Charismatic Villain paired with Zamasu is a fantastic combination, as Zamasu will get to stay on the field because it has Indestructible, and of course when you're attacking, your opponent's discarding cards from their hand. Our 10-cost cell is a very handy, low cost, high value boss monster for the deck. It will be a dual attacker double strike, and it has some cool effects on it too. Android 20 for the deck is practically our 1-chumper. If you don't know what that is, when you attack with a battle card, you could boost with that Android 20, therefore giving your battle card double strike plus 10k. And of course our Yellow Sun Goku here is such a handy card. What you can do with it is, if you have a cell with an energy cost of 4 or more in play, you could play the Goku, and of course when you play it, you get to rest one of your opponent's cards. So that can also rest their energy, which can be very high value to be able to go for game. And then of course for the Dormant, the one of in the deck, I'm treating it more as a ultimate for the deck. It's roughly around €6 to €9, give or take. The card is really, really good, and if you can get more of them, I highly recommend to get more for the deck. It will just pretty much shut off your opponent's damage for the turn. You will have to just use your blockers to defend for the initial attack, because you still get to counter, and because it's not negating the attack, your opponent's attack will still go through. Then you can use your blocker to be able to defend that attack, and now your opponent can only attack one more time for the turn. And for turns 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a little bit of 5, make sure that you have your androids in your opening hand, then play your 1-drops to be able to draw from them and then place them under your leader. Therefore you already have now 1, so that way when you use your leader's effect, you can still place a second one underneath it on your turn 1. And then when we get to turn 2, continue to place your androids under your leader, then awaken, play your Unison, and of course try to go for your 4-cost barrier cell already. Turn 3, play your 8 cost cell and start focusing on a second chain. Alternatively, you can also play your 10k crits for free and do the charismatic villain Zamasu combo just for that little extra pressure to your opponent. And then for turns 4, if the game is more of a slower pace, you could also play the 10 cost cell for a lot of damage to your opponent. And for turns 5, go for your Wretched Regeneration. Use its activate main, so you'll actually have to pay an additional energy, therefore it costs 5 energy, to be able to play your Perfect Force Cell, which will remove all cards in your opponent's hand except for 3. Then you use your Unison's effect to -7 and be able to remove the last 3 cards from your opponent's hand, and of course make them crit alive. So now they have no defense and they just lost a life, and now you can swing for game. And for some other side deck options, you could go with 2 Android 18 Bionic Blitz for super combos. This will help hand destruction to your opponent as well. We also have a Realm of Gods Chumper Destroys. This is more or less if you want an extra card and you can't afford the Cell Kamehamehas, this is always a cheap little alternative for as well. And finally, for a Z Battle card, it's not out yet, this will come from the latest set. This is a very handy card. This will become a 1 cost, 1 Z energy, 25k double strike to your opponent. This is going to be such a staple for green. I will expect this card's probably going to become expensive, so if you happen to get a booster pack or a booster box and you pull these, do keep one of them. It's a very, very good card. And of course, moving on to the last color we have for today, we got yellow. Now, this is Vegeta Trunks. It's all about going for your 1-drops. Now, the deck is very, very good in defense. We're trying to focus on having a 1-drop in hand, so you can either have your Trunks or your Vegeta, and they will allow you to play the other. So if you have Vegeta, you can grab your Trunks. If you have Trunks, you can grab Vegeta. And what you want to do is, you want to get your Vegeta on the field, then be able to evolve on top, and once you've evolved, you get to draw 1, attack with this card, place it under your leader, and once you've done that, then you can awaken on turn 2 onwards. And now you have 2 battle cards under your leader, which therefore allows you to do the activate battle here. Place 1 card from under this card in its owner's drop area. This card gets 10k power and double strike for the battle. And now because we have 2, we can do that twice in a game, which is very, very handy. And the key points to talk about for this deck, try to evolve your Vegeta as soon as possible. So on turn 2, try to get him out and go for that attack. Get rid of your opponent's card in rest mode. Awaken. You can spam out your 1-drops very quickly with this deck, so never be afraid to use them as boost material just to help you survive that bit better. Try to focus on getting an evolve once per turn, that way you get a lot of draw potential, because your leader allows you to get a beneficial effect here, which is when you activate an EX skill, from your hand, draw 1 card, and then the card itself also says draw 1, so every time you play something, you're drawing 2 more cards. When your 3-cost Trunks on the field rests an opponent's card, and you have Poutine in hand, try to focus on playing your Poutine. That way, if your opponent plays something else that turn, it's going to rest that card too. However, their next turn, when they play something, it will activate both at the same time. You can't do it 2 cards separately. But it really helps to push for that defense, to keep that survivability that little bit longer. Your Final Flash is one of the best cards in your deck. If your opponent tries to swing for a triple strike to you to finish game, you can just pay 1, play your Final Flash, and it will negate the skills of that battle card. Therefore, you're only taking 1 damage instead of 2. And another good tip is try to keep an energy active from turns 3 onwards, because yellow is a little bit energy heavy, so it's a good idea to try and keep 1 open for defense. And of course, for your turns 1, 2, 3, and a little bit of 4, keep a 1-drop Vegeta or Trunks in your hand. That way you can play it on your opening hand. And of course, for turns 2, evolve with your Vegeta, attack with them, awaken. If your opponent is playing a slower paced deck, or you have enough free counters, also try to set up your 3-cost Trunks. And then of course, for turns 3, go for some damage. So play your Turles or your SSB Vegito, and go with as many evolves per turn as you can to keep that drawing going. And of course, finally for turns 4, play your Z leader, and of course play your Vegeta Trunks, the 8-cost. Then of course you can swing with your 8-cost, deal some damage to your opponent, use your leader's effect to be able to restand your Vegeta Trunks, and then you get to attack again for a triple strike critical to your opponent. And it also restands your leader too. So, that was all the decks. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed, do so. It greatly helps me a lot. Until next time, peace. Links to the deck will be in the video description. Once you have 3 or more cards, fucking fly, piss off. once you have 3 or more cards under your leader,